So what's up, guys? This is the DFS 5-pack. We're here to do what we're calling like our little first take, just kind of videos to talk over a couple of sports discussions. You catch the whole Last Dance thing last night? I told you I canceled cable with no sports, so I didn't get a chance to watch it. But man, it is covering my Facebook and Twitter right now.
I did. Excuse me. I think that you kind of feel the same way I did. Like Jordan, and I'll put it like this, and I heard someone say this. LeBron is the best basketball player of all time, in my opinion. But Jordan is the greatest of all time. So LeBron is the best basketball player ever, but Jordan is the greatest of all time. We can get into that like on another video, but that's how I view it. I know other people think about it like that. That's how I view it. In regards to The Last Dance, at least as far as the first two episodes or the first two, parts of the series were concerned, nothing new came out for me. I mean, I knew all this stuff, so I don't know.
I might need to hear a refresher. I guess I didn't know that the 84, 85 Bulls enjoyed cocaine so much, but I guess that was something
at that time.
Well, me because I was 5, but yes.
Exactly. Or me because I was 2, but you get my drift.
Yeah, I mean, all right, guys. So we're going to get into some questions. We got some little MLB, NFL, NBA. And we put these questions. So we actually prep for this one a little bit more so that we can we have our answers written down. So, again, if you guys are new to it, subscribe to the channel. Thumbs up is appreciated. We're usually here talking daily fantasy sports. Obviously, that is not really a thing right now, unless you're a dork like Bellman over there playing League of Legends. Other than that, all the main sports are clearly not applicable at this time.
Yes, there is nothing going on, and tonight is actually a day off from League of Legends, so nothing today. I'm stressed.
All right, so again, I want to preface this question. We're building our optimal NBA starting 5. And just a reminder to people, this is a question that you can interpret a couple of different ways. I think for me, I'm more likely to really try to maybe not grab the best 5 guys, but 5 guys I think would work well together strategically. You probably put some time in it, so you're probably kind of thinking about that as well. But I wanted to put a little caveat into the question and take out no Michael Jordan, no Kobe Bryant, no LeBron James. The reason behind that is if we didn't do that, both starting 5s are obviously, I think you put LeBron at the power forward or point guard, however you want to call it. You put MJ at the 2, and you go from there. And more than likely, you're probably going to find Kobe on your wing positions as well. So no Michael Jordan, no Kobe Bryant, no LeBron James. And this is post Magic and Bird, our best optimal starting 5. Would you like to go first or second, young man?
I'm sure that you have that were similar. And yeah, as far as picking the 5 best players or the all-time starting 5, your question was the all-time starting 5, so that's how I looked at it.
Yeah, I mean, you're building your best starting 5, but you're not going to pick Tim Duncan, Shaquille O'Neal, and Hakeem Olajuwon and put them on the same team, right?
Well, because that's not your best starting 5.
Agreed. I mean,
centers.
Yeah, I didn't put Ray Allen on mine, but if somebody had Ray Allen on their ultimate starting 5 because they wanted that deadly 3-point shooter, I could get on board with it. He's not on mine. I don't think he's even close to a top 5 NBA player, nor does probably anybody that's not part of the 84, 85 Bulls right now.
It's funny you mentioned him because he's in mine right now. I'm taking him out as we speak because I cannot. Shooting guard has 3 guys I really keep going back and forth on, and Ray Allen's one of them. So
because you want that deadly assassin, the guy who plays, runs around, wears out the other team, and can knock down 3-pointers with the best of them. But in your heart of hearts, nobody thinks he's one of the 5 better players left.
No, he's a top 50 player of all time. He's not a top 10 player of all time. There's no doubt about that. The other thing I'll say about him, what'd you say?
No, go ahead.
I think he's he's athletic too. And, people just look at him and it's a 3-point shooter. In his prime, man, he was one of the best scorers in the league. Prime Ray Allen was lethal. Again, not a top 10 player of all time, but a top 50 player of all time. He was pretty damn good.
And a top 5 shooter of all time. You need shooters.
So,
you want to go for your 5 first? You want to go first or second?
I'll go first, and I'll just get into it right here, and I'll start with the shooting guard and the 3 guys I really have trouble getting into. Ultimately, I'm going to land on the 3rd guy I talk about, but between Ray Allen, Klay Thompson, who is certainly not a top 10 NBA player of all time. He's not even a top 50 at this point, in my opinion, but he's close to making this all-time starting 5 because He's a great shooter and he's a great defender. And on a team like this, that means a lot. However, in the end, I'm going to give the spot to Dwayne Wade. I'm starting kind of out of order here, but Dwayne Wade's going to be my shooting guard. Just kind of brings it all. Big reason I went with Wade over Klay Thompson also is I could not stomach having 3 Warriors / ex-Warriors on my team.
Okay.
Two of them I couldn't get away from.
Gotcha.
So as far
I like this already because I can tell ours are actually going to be, I think, drastically different.
Okay, fair enough.
And I like that.
So as far as Dwayne Wade goes, just brings a lot of everything. Only thing you wish he did better was shoot the 3. But I think this team has enough scoring, certainly enough 3-point shooting with the next guy I'm going to bring up. Dwayne Wade, the ultimate winner, again, brings a little bit of everything. You might not have Dwayne Wade.
Leadership, I don't, but I'm not going to knock it. It's not like I didn't think about him.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, you might not have him, but that's because you can only have 5 guys. It's one of those, like, it's not like you're not playing him in DFS because you don't like him. There's just only so many positions.
Yeah.
So, ultimately, I respect him a lot. With no, like, LeBron James or MJ on this squad, I wanted a guy like that. And he's the closest thing. So, he's my shooting guard. As my point guard, probably obvious at this point, it's Steph Curry, the best shooter of all time. Already is a top 10 NBA player of all time, in my opinion. He's a lock on this team in my eyes. I don't see how you wouldn't have him. Again, there's so many guys you can make cases for. I have like 20 guys in my honorable mention list, but for me, Steph Curry, the best shooter of all time, just opens up the floor, opens up everything. In this day and age, and that's, we're playing a game in 2020. I know we're incorporating all these eras. I don't know how you don't go with the best shooter of all time. I'm interested to hear your list. And then we'll go to small forward. And as much as I didn't want to do it, it's Kevin Durant.
Yep, agreed.
Kevin Durant, just arguably the best scorer we've seen, arguably the best scorer of all time. I don't want to make that statement because I certainly haven't seen every scorer that played in the NBA.
He might be the most skilled scorer of our generation. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, if he had Michael Jordan's persona, Kevin Durant would be dropping 40 every single night.
And he's very efficient too. Like, he's a
unselfish too.
Unselfish. He's a different breed. He's long. He's a good defender.
Versatile defender too.
He's just the small forward, man. I think there were other guys I looked at small forward. The other guys that I looked at small forward were Scottie Pippen, but no. And then I thought about like Kawhi and Giannis, but I just couldn't do either of them over Durant and his ability to score. Although I thought about Kawhi on this team hard.
Okay, and I'll get into that later. Like I'm probably as big of a Giannis fan as there is right now. I don't think he fits in any ideal 5 because of his lack of shooting right now. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to start a team, he is, to me, up there with all of the guys that we're naming today. Giannis, to me, is still, even in the infancy of his career, right up there with where you would start your team. But if you don't start with him, I don't know that he fits anywhere else that you want to go because he doesn't shoot. And the way we've watched the NBA mature, like, I want at most one guy on my team that just can't shoot a 3-pointer.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel the exact same way.
All right, keep going.
So the next guy I'm going to go with is Tim Duncan.
Okay.
So kind of that do it all big man can do a little bit or a lot of everything. The rare type that's just, can do a lot, can do a bit of everything, but is really good at everything. Talk about another guy with big time leadership skills, a winner. He's a guy that I respect.
A quiet team player, too, that fits into any 5.
The big men were, like, really hard for me because
they are.
Because it also depends on, like, what style of game you want to play. Because the first guy, Duncan is just like a quiet assassin. He's a guy that, probably the younger generation doesn't really know about. But I remember Duncan from his college days, and I remember him staying, like, 4 years at Wake Forest. He was awesome. He was awesome. Then he came in as like a hyped number 1 pick, lived up to that hype, but was very, very humble and modest, like unlike most NBA stars. Very different from most NBA stars. I appreciated that. He brought a human side to like the NBA, a side you don't normally see. And besides that, he was just really freaking good. One of the best post scorers in the game. I can't pick like one thing that he was amazing at. He certainly wasn't as dominant as Shaq, who we'll get to next. But of all those big men in between Duncan, Kevin Garnett, and Dirk, it was really hard for me. I almost wanted to go two of those guys over Shaq. But at the end of the day, I had to go Shaq just because of how dominant he is inside. There's no getting away from him. I feel like with Curry, and then I had Ray Allen, but ultimately with Dwayne Wade and Durant, you'll be able to spread the floor enough for those big men. Duncan isn't a three-point shooter, but he also doesn't need to play way down low like Shaq does in my eyes. So I think that they can play together. Ultimately, you're going to have to mix and match some amazing talents to make this work. Wanted both guys on the team. This was hard at first, but for me, like Curry and Durant were locks. And then Shaq was like a lock. So like after that, it wasn't like it became easy. I just couldn't get away from Durant and Curry. I'm interested to hear your squad. Why don't you go on?
All right, so I'm actually going to go from the inside out because that's how I built it in my mind. And again, I'm with you 100%. You talked about having to build with the big men, and there is some decisions to be made. And you talked about Shaquille, you talked about Duncan, you talked about KG, and you talked about Dirk Nowitzki. Like, first things first, I'm with you. To me, and we mentioned this in the video we did last week, a lot of you guys who are younger don't remember how good Shaq was when he was first in the NBA. I mean, if you want to start take his couple years in Miami and then move back to the infancy of his career, you might remember fat, out of shape Shaq, but he was so dominant at his peak. And the other thing is, when you're building an ultimate five like this, my other guys are so good that at the end of the game, I can take Shaquille O'Neal out if I have to worry about his free throws.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I started with Shaq, and that was the first guy that I put onto this team that I wanted to build around. So my next move was I wanted to surround him with nothing but shooters so that you could completely open up the lane for him to dominate. And if they brought it down there, I'm leaving assassins all the way across the three-point arc. So for that reason, I took Dirk Nowitzki as my power forward over Tim Duncan. I didn't even consider Kevin Garnett because, quite honestly, I just think Duncan's a better version of Garnett. They do a lot of the same things. And I just think Duncan is better. So Garnett was never even in consideration for me. But Dirk could. Also, for a lot of you younger folks, you remember older Dirk Nowitzki. Prime Dirk was amazing. And one of the reasons he only has one ring, he happened to get saddled in a West that had a very dominant Kobe Bryant and a very dominant Spurs team that left him as the odd man out too many years. He did get his ring. He was the best player on that team. That ring means more to me than the Kevin Durant rings. I know we've discussed this before. What was your thoughts on that?
Than the Kevin Durant ring.
2 rings.
He has 2 rings.
Not saying that I'd rather have 2. I give Dirk more credit for his 1 than I do for Durant for his 2.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, he carried his team. He also beat, he beat LeBron and stuff. So, yeah, I agree with that.
All right, so you went Shaq Duncan, I went Shaq Dirk. I fully agree. If I was starting a team and those are my options, I would take Tim Duncan. But knowing that I already have Shaq in there, I opted for the shooting of Dirk Nowitzki. Duncan's the better defender, so I did consider that, but ultimately went with Dirk. Again, at the 3, Kevin Durant, versatile defender, 6'11", 7 feet tall, big wingspan, can knock down the three-pointer with the best of them, unselfish superstar. And as much as I knock him for going to Golden State, to me, he was one of the easier puts in this lineup, correct?
I mean, he was. And which also speaks to how I view, like, it makes me rethink, who's the best player in the NBA question. Because he's not playing this year, but man, why isn't he like right up there with or better than Giannis and Kawhi? There's a reason I'm putting him so easily on this team.
He's also not playing this year.
He fits like any type of team, though,
yes,
because of what he does, which is also a big thing about him. Like what you said about Giannis is true. And what you said about, and you didn't say anything about Kawhi, but like Kawhi, he's not an amazing three-pointer. So like, I don't know. At the end of the day, Durant's just a better scorer. And
yeah, well, Kawhi is my shooting guard.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
So the thing with Kawhi, again, if he's not needed to be the dominant guy, then he can go there and be the best wing defender. I mean, he wing defends like Pippen, but he shoots the 3 at a significantly higher mark. He's a guy that you can get the ball to at the end of the game, along with Dirk, along with Kevin Durant, so you have multiple ways to go right there. If he just needs to be a defensive guy, I don't think he minds playing defense and just taking a couple shots. If you need him to be the alpha dog down the stretch and he's rolling that day, he could do that as well. But while he's not Curry, he's not Durant, he's not Klay Thompson, he's a pretty darn good three-point shooter, especially when he's not the alpha on the team necessarily, and he's shooting more open threes.
That's how I feel about Dwayne Wade.
Okay. Kawhi's slightly better, I would say, shooter than Dwayne Wade. Dwayne Wade in his prime, though, I mean, there aren't a lot of guys you'd rather give the ball to at the end of the game. You know, he gets slept on a little bit. I'm sorry. I'll take Dwayne Wade in the ball at the end of the game up there with a lot of the greats.
That Dwayne Wade Kawhi Leonard matchup would be a must-see TV. And to be honest, I think that's like those guys are a good comparison of like how good they like. I think they're very similar in terms of like where they'll go down in like NBA history. Do you agree? Like in terms of their ranking?
Well, let's see what happens for the second half of Kawhi's career. Because if Kawhi inks 2 more championships with the Clippers and he wins with 3 different teams, then I think he goes down significantly higher than Dwayne Wade, who did not ride LeBron James, but wasn't the best player on 2 of his championships. However, if Kawhi gets injured and the second half of his career isn't that great, I think Dwayne might be on the higher pecking order.
Yeah, agreed. Because Dwayne does have a title all his own.
Yeah, and that not only does he have a title on his own, like, I know Shaq was on that team, and Shaq was also really good, but Dwayne Wade, that was one of the better performances in finals history.
If not the best. I read, like, an article like that, like, ESPN came out with it a couple of years ago. It was, like, graded, like, the best player performances in NBA finals history ever. And Michael Jordan had, like, 9 in the top 10, but was number 1 that year. And they were down. Like, they were down in that series, and Dwayne Wade, like, Dwayne Wade led them back big time. He was incredible then. He's a guy that also, I think, gets slept on from the younger generation just because he's not LeBron.
Well, I also think if you go back to that finals and if you didn't watch it, you might not remember it. The only knock on him for that finals was it honestly felt like the referees were in his back pocket because he was at the line every play, it seemed like.
He was. All right, I'm interested to hear who you got a point guard over Curry.
Okay, so, again, this is the other thing. If I had to start my franchise and just take one guy, I would take Steph Curry over my choice. But I wanted a true point guard. And as much as Curry, as great as Curry is, I don't really think of him as a true point guard. I also didn't want a defensive deficiency, somebody that my team could come out and attack. Now, I'm going with Chris Paul. And I considered Steve Nash, and I also considered, like I said, Curry. I thought about Jason Kidd as well. But ultimately, I went with CP3 because even though I think he's slightly overrated as a defender, he is the best defender at that group. He is a pass-first point guard, so he can distribute it to Kawhi, KD, Dirk, and Shaq. He doesn't care if he doesn't shoot the whole game, but if you leave him uncovered, he is also an excellent three-point shooter as a spot-up 3 guy, as long as he isn't, he's not taking guys off the dribble like Steph Curry or anything like that. So, again, very much like Giannis, if I had to, draft a team and, I had a top 10 pick, I want Curry because I think he can lead a team on his own way more than I think Chris Paul can. But because I have all these scorers surrounding him, I was looking at a guy I didn't need to score, but could still hit open threes. So I went with Chris Paul.
Well, I think Curry is the ultimate scorer, though, for me. As far as I'm concerned, I didn't need, a Dirk to score over Duncan because I have Curry. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how I viewed it. Curry is that good, in my opinion, where he had to make my squad. Again, all this stuff is very opinion. It's all opinion based, so it's fun to break down.
Exactly. Yeah. We will never see all these guys in their primes play all your guys in their primes, especially because Kevin Durant can't be 2 people.
So CP3 was also a guy I thought about. He made my honorable mention list along with these other guys, and I'll read them off real quick. And I'm sure there's more that I didn't even think about, but these are the guys that I thought about.
Hold up. When we talk about big guys, the hard part to me too is Hakeem or Shaq.
Well, it was Shaq, but yes.
Olajuwon was really good. You couldn't claim
David Robinson.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So we'll start there. Here's my honorable mention list, and it's pretty deep. Guys that I thought about that ultimately didn't make it. David Robinson, Hakeem. This is in no order. Kevin Garnett, Karl Malone. I know you're sour on him because of his 4 free throws and how he choked, but he was really good. He deserves to be.
He was really good, but Duncan or Malone, I would still take Tim Duncan. So I'd go the same route that you went.
But he was an honorable mention. Chris Paul, Scottie Pippen, Ray Allen, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Klay Thompson, Dirk, Charles Barkley, Giannis, Kawhi. That's it.
People forget how good Barkley was because he has no
Yeah.
rings. Barkley was good.
I thought about him big time, but there were just other better players.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, how do you want to build your team? How are they going to complement one another? And that's where you're not taking the best 5 guys because everybody on these teams can score, but like I don't need Chris Paul to score.
The other thing about these older players is they couldn't shoot threes. So unless they were like a Shaq or a Duncan, like all-time best, like it's hard for them to make it.
Yeah, for sure. Again, like Pippen could shoot threes all right for what was required back in the 90s, but he can't shoot threes like Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, or anything like that. He's more like Dwayne Wade. Like he can hit him if he's open every once in a while, but you can also like sag off him and leave him open.
Exactly.
All right. So interested, any thoughts you guys have, feel free to throw it in the comments section. We'll move on to question number 2 for the day. This is one of your questions for me. And for those of you not looking at it and only listening, would I take the Bucks winning a title, like say hypothetically this year, and then Giannis leaves, or Giannis stays forever, he's a forever Buck, and the Bucks lose the title 5 times? Where did this question come from? Did it come from anything in your real life?
Yeah, it came from my life. I talk about it all the time with my buddies, my dad, about the Indians in the 90s, about how, like, it sucks that we never won a World Series title, but, like, I wouldn't trade anything for, like, the amount of fun and for how good the Indians were in the 90s. I know it sucks that we didn't win a title, but sports are about more than just titles. So
yeah, and I thought about it. Okay.
So I'm interested to hear, like, where you stand on this. Now, this is kind of like an extreme example. I might not have needed to put the lose 5 times in the finals, but I wanted to like put some emphasis on that one. So I'm interested to hear where you land.
I took the title, and I did really think about it for exactly all the reasons that you brought up. I knew it was coming from something. I was kind of thinking you were talking about the Indians, for example, but I couldn't take the heartache of losing in the finals 5 times never to get that ring. So ultimately, I took the title and had to deal with the Bucks probably not being a factor.
I mean, I get that too. We have our title. Like on the flip side, we've got our one title in 2016, and man, like I'll live that down forever. So I get that also. I'm just interested to hear like kind of where you stood on that because I think there's good reasons for both. Like the other thing about making the finals 5 times, it was more like it wasn't supposed to be like the heartache of losing. It was supposed to be like your team is really good and they're every year. So like I guess I could have phrased that better if that makes sense.
Well, it's also really easy not living in the moment. I think I gave the easy cop-out answer that you want the title, of course, right? But there is something to be said for always being good.
Yeah.
Like you're a Browns fan. Like it sucks, right? Like you're never competitive. You know, by week 6, you're always done paying attention. You don't care. You know, both Milwaukee teams, the Brewers and the Bucks, have been mostly terrible for the majority of my life. There's been some good seasons. The year CC came to Milwaukee, he was phenomenal. The Bucks with Ray Allen, Cassell, and Big Dog played in the Eastern Conference Finals. That was exciting. But ultimately, it sucks when your team blows and you can't go anywhere. So there is a reason to be excited by the notion of being good and being a perennial in competition.
Like those fans of the Utah Jazz in like the 90s, yeah, they're upset they didn't win a title, but they probably feel similarly about them that I do about the Indians. That like, man, they were good throughout that whole time, and like it was fun to go to games, watching them on TV. Like made the finals a couple times. Like I bet it's the exact same thing.
It's very similar, no questions about it. And there's definitely some teams like that. Like think about it if you're a Buffalo Bills fan. You know, it had to be really painful to lose 4 years in a row, but at least you were always competitive, and every game was exciting.
There is something now, like your point about like the heartache of losing 5 times is also like, so maybe you wouldn't want to have that, but like you'd rather make the finals and lose than not make it if you like could either have one or the other. You know what I mean?
That's why we always go back to like the LeBron conversation. People are like, oh, he's lost 6 times.
Yes.
I'm like, yeah, he went to the finals 9 times though. And almost always he got there and had to face a vastly superior team by himself for like 3 or 4 of those times. So he's supposed to lose those finals games. Just because he couldn't pull off a David versus Goliath type of thing. Look, oh, he's better than everybody else. Yeah, but it's 1 on 4.
I actually thought you were going to go with the Giannis stays forever, but I get it. I was really interested. So
sweet. I really thought about it, but the pain of losing it hurts so bad. And then like think about it 5 times. That's where I was back and forth. I really did think closely about this one though.
Sweet.
All right. So of all the questions that I had to do a lot of research on, it's this next one. It's really, really tight. And I want to get your answer first. And if you have any citation or reasons behind it, because we're talking top starting pitcher of our lifetime. And I went and I looked at the postseason numbers, the regular season numbers. It is tight as a drum. So who did you come up with?
So I'm going to get to my answer after I go through a few guys.
Okay.
But for me, this was more about just like, and you're more of a numbers guy. I'm more of a gut feel guy. There's so many numbers you could look at with these guys. Like I went more on who I saw, what I felt, not who I saw because I saw all of them. Obviously all their numbers are going to be really good. That's why they're the best pitchers in baseball. So you asked me I can't remember how exactly did you phrase the question?
Who's the best starting pitcher of your lifetime?
Okay. So the best pitcher, like quote unquote pitcher, is Greg Maddux.
Pound for pound. I know what you're saying.
He is the best pitcher. He is the best. He doesn't have the best stuff. He didn't throw the hardest, but he is the best. If you want to talk about the art of pitching, it's Greg Maddux. Now, if you want to talk about the best guy at their peak that I saw is Pedro Martinez. However, it didn't last long enough, but at his peak, he was the best. You want to talk about the nastiest, like the guy that just struck fear in the most guys? That was Randy Johnson, for sure, as you know. Maybe gets a little too much credit because of his presence on the mound, but not really. I mean, he's what everyone wants Chris Sale to be. Maybe the most feared lefty ever, through 120 miles an hour. So
he was tops at killing birds.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, and you're going to disagree with this, and I'm not even being prisoner of the moment because I love all these guys. And the other guy I wanted to throw in, so the combination of all the above are two guys, Roger Clemens. But for me, if I have to say one guy, the best pitcher, it's Max Scherzer.
Ooh.
I think he's a combination of all of them. I love him. It's hard to give him that title over all these other guys, but after winning a World Series, he's been a number one for years. He's got amazing stuff. He's talking about the art of pitching. He's perfected his craft. He's a guy I want on the mound if I'm in a must-win situation. I love Scherzer. There were other guys I thought about. I just mentioned Clemens. I thought about him. Verlander, he's a nice combination of these guys. But ultimately, it's Max Scherzer for me, and that's just what it is, man. I love this question because I really broke it down. I really broke it down, and I had a hard time answering it. And when I really put down the first three, because I'd already had Scherzer in the back of my mind, I was like, honestly, he is a combination of all these guys. Like, he's got a little bit of all these guys in them. So I love the Bulldog that is Max Scherzer. Why don't you critique my list and then tell me where you went?
Well, we're going to have a lot of the same guys right there. And so before I went back to look at the numbers, I thought I was going to come up with the answer of Randy Johnson. And then I ultimately looked at what he accomplished throughout his career. And really, he was so good for about 5 years in Arizona.
Yes.
But for a lot of time in Seattle early in his career, for his time in New York, even though it was brief, his time with the Giants, his numbers were not overwhelming. Lots of strikeouts. His peak was probably the best. That 5 year or so run in Arizona, he was beyond dominant. We're talking Cy Youngs every single year. But for a guy who was up on the hill for close to 20 seasons, it wasn't as good as some of the other ones. I thought his numbers were a little bit more overwhelming. So it wasn't Randy Johnson who I ultimately thought was going to be my ending answer on that one. Next person I went to was Greg Maddux. And again, I looked at him. I'm with you 1,000,000%. Pound for pound, what he did with the velocity or lack of velocity compared to some of these other guys, Greg Maddux is amazing. Some of the stats that you put up as far as the number of guys that he walked, it's flabbergasting. So I thought about him. I thought about Clayton Kershaw because overall regular season numbers, he might have the best, but his lack of postseason production, I just couldn't put him at the top. So he was considered. Roger Clemens, 6 Cy Youngs, overwhelming, solid in the postseason, very similar postseason numbers to all these guys. I couldn't give him the title because of steroids. I don't know, would that weigh into your equation at all?
Yeah, 100% weighted in my equation. I felt like I had to throw him in there at the end for me because I texted my dad earlier to get his opinion on who. Like I asked him a question, and he said Clemens or Pedro. So like I had to throw Clemens in there because I really respect his opinion about this more than anyone else.
If Clemens wasn't kind of a known juicer, I think he would have been my guy because his career lasted a long time. But there was clearly, I guess not clearly, he's probably a little bit aggressive. There seemed to be an obvious time of his career when he hit a second win that really seemed to be fueled by performance-enhancing substances. Did it not?
100%.
Okay, so I couldn't give it to him. So you mentioned that Pedro Martinez, it didn't last as long. After going back to look at it, his pinnacle of his career was just as long as these other guys, with the exception of Clemens. So I went with Pedro. Again, his peak was almost as good as Randy Johnson's, but actually the consistency lasted a little bit longer than the big unit. So I went with Pedro.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge Pedro fan. He obviously was a guy I really thought about. What do you think about my Max call?
You know I love Max Scherzer. I'll take Pedro over Max. What's that?
Why not Scherzer? That was my question.
He's still got time, but I don't know. There's something about Pedro that after looking through all these guys, because I'll be honest, I didn't really closely consider Max to actually be the guy. Just like I didn't really think I had to look up Verlander. I felt like he was an honorable mention to be brought up on this list, and I looked at those two guys very, very similar. The main guys I was focusing on were Pedro Martinez, the big unit, and Greg Maddux. Those are the three guys that came off my head. And I thought about Max and Clayton. And I think Max still has time. You know, another championship, another Cy Young, and he'll be right there.
Okay, I feel that.
You know, and I love Max Scherzer, so like I'm not sitting here telling you you're wrong. You know, I'm a huge Scherzer fan.
Yeah, I get that.
All right. This is the one I had to spend the most time on, though. I thought it was the hardest question of all of them that we did.
Yeah, same. The next question was the easiest.
All right, start, bench, cut. Dirk, Duncan, Shaq. I'll start Shaq, I'll bench Duncan, and I'll cut Dirk.
This was my question to you.
Yep.
And I was interested where you'd go here, although we kind of answered it in our first question.
Well, kind of, but again, I put Dirk in my 5 over Duncan, but I'd still take Duncan over Dirk depending on how you're assembling your team. Like if we were like picking on the playground and I could pick these guys, I would pick Duncan ahead of Dirk and then build my team around Duncan. But knowing that I already had Shaq, I wanted the guy who could hit a three-pointer.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you, and that's exactly how I have it too. It's hard not to have Shaq. He's just so dominant. So I'm with you, Shaq, Duncan, Dirk.
All right. So the next question is weird, and I made it weird on purpose. So
this is the easiest question for me that you asked me.
Okay. What trio? For me, it ended up being between two of them.
Okay.
And I made the question. I made the question weird on purpose because, like, they don't line up. They're not all the same positions. They're all a little bit different. Which trio of NFL players would you start with? The top group is Peyton Manning, Joe Thomas, Ray Lewis. The second one is Matt Ryan, then Deion Sanders and Reggie White. Obviously, Matt Ryan's the weakest of the quarterbacks, but Deion Sanders and Reggie White are arguably the two best defensive players, I guess, up there with Lawrence Taylor, ever. And then Pat Mahomes, Richard Sherman, and Keyshawn Johnson. Like, how much credit are you giving Pat Mahomes? That was my thought here. If you think the guy's this transcendent, Richard Sherman's a great cornerback, and Keyshawn Johnson is an above-average wide receiver. Not a great category, but I thought it was three totally different builds, and I wanted to see where you went.
So, first off, I actually feel like the one you said it was between two of them for you. I think the one that I chose, and it's easy for me, the easiest of all the questions is the one that you left out. So I can't wait to argue about this. But first off, how did you come up with the guys in this question? How did you come up with it?
Well, I started with Manning, Thomas, and Ray Lewis. And then I wanted to take a lesser quarterback. So I put Matt Ryan in there, who's still a very good quarterback. And I think under a different situation, Matt Ryan's an MVP. He almost won a Super Bowl. He's good, but he's not great like the other two.
I think you're underrating Joe Thomas and Ray Lewis. That's where I went. Peyton Manning, Joe Thomas, Ray Lewis. Because, Ray Lewis is on the Deion Sanders, Reggie White level. It's not even like, oh, he's a little bit below.
Sure, but a linebacker is the most easily replaceable of all the defensive positions, whereas if you ask GMs, they want cornerbacks and pass rushers. And I sided with you, though. I took Manning, Thomas, and Lewis.
It's Ray Lewis, though. Like, you're right. Like, in general, you want those guys, but not if you can have a Ray Lewis. Like, you're right. Like, you'd rather have a transcendent DN, but when your linebacker is Ray Lewis, you'll take it. And then Joe Thomas, like a Hall of Fame left tackle. I'm not going to say he's the best left tackle ever, but his career, he's probably underappreciated because of Cleveland, but I certainly don't underappreciate him. He's not the best left tackle ever, but he's a Hall of Fame left tackle, and he's like the exact guy you want protecting Peyton Manning. So, I'd rather have Mahomes than Peyton Manning. But I think the difference between Manning and Mahomes is much smaller than the difference between Manning and Matt Ryan. I mean, I think Manning is, one of the all-time best quarterbacks ever. To say that Mahomes is even better than him seems unfair. I'd rather have Mahomes, but Keyshawn Johnson and Sherman, very, very good players. I don't put them on the level of Joe Thomas and Ray Lewis. And the second one, the quarterback's just not good enough. And the second two of Deion and Reggie is the best second two, but I think that Thomas and Lewis is close. So I loved the question. I went with this, I guess the same as you. All right, cool.
Yeah, we ultimately sided on the same thing. I was trying to see how you valued Pat Mahomes versus Peyton Manning was kind of the question I really wanted to get out of this one. It was a big part of it. And you're right, though. Like the Deion-Reggie combo, I mean, if you take the quarterbacks out of here, I love Joe Thomas, Ray Lewis, and I have a lot of respect for Richard Sherman. Keyshawn Johnson was kind of a throw-in. I was trying to think of like who's like a wide receiver that's like a 7.5, not a dominant like Michael Irvin, Randy Moss type, but also well above average. So I went the same way with but Manning, choked under pressure a lot. He's got the one ring for all those years there. Is his playoff success significantly greater than Matt Ryan's? I mean, it's better, but Ryan's played well in some playoff games. So I did go the same way as you, though. Peyton Manning, Joe Thomas, Ray Lewis, because even though linebackers are not as valuable as cornerbacks and pass rushers, Ray Lewis is kind of a transcendent leader on the defense as well.
Yeah, exactly. He's like the guy you want. I mean, when you think about linebackers in football, he's like the guy.
Yeah. There are certain positions in football, for those of you guys who maybe don't watch the draft or free agency as close, like, GMs, quarterback is where you start, and then after that it's left tackle, which Joe Thomas is, cornerbacks and pass rushers. And then everybody else takes a bit of a hit like that. Like running backs are kind of like linebackers. They can come in and make a difference right away.
It's funny, like linebackers and running backs seem very seem very disposable.
Yep.
But they're like almost, I know with linebackers at least, especially a lot of times they're like the leaders of the defense.
Well, it's funny too, because I'm thinking about like playing high school football. Your best players were linebackers and running backs.
Exactly.
But so that's also why they are saturated with the best players, and there's more of them, because from a young age, the best players are playing running back and linebacker because they get the most action.
True. Good point.
I mean, for all the most, probably half you guys listening played high school ball, if not college ball, and you can relate to something like that.
I mean, the best players play running back and linebacker. This is what it is. Like, obviously there's rare. Agreed. What you're saying.
All right. Next up, I like this question. This was one of yours.
Yep. So why don't you go ahead?
What one rule change would you make in each of the big three sports: baseball, basketball, and football? So I put baseball first because that one's easy, and anybody who watches the show routinely knows about it because I have been complaining and whining about this for years. I would do an automated strike zone. No questions about it. That was the easiest one for me. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Did you have the same thing for baseball?
I did.
Okay. They just make too many mistakes. It would be such an easy fix. Like the human element argument to me is silly. It's the whole, what's the way it's always been done. I just think it's silly.
Agreed.
Okay. Next, NBA. And I thought about this one long and hard. And I'm going to get, there aren't enough people watching this to really get any pushback from it. And it might seem too gimmicky, but I would add a 4-point shot. Have you ever thought about that?
I mean, I've thought about it, but it's definitely not where I went.
Okay. And I can get why people think it might be too gimmicky.
It is, in my opinion. Go ahead.
But that's what they thought about the 3-point shot when it first came out.
So, okay. Your argument, I know, would be like, people can't say, oh, that's how we've always done it, like the 3-point shot. And I agree with you. That's not a reason not to do a 3-point shot. But just because, on the flip side of that, just because you've done something for so long doesn't mean that it's right to change it. Do you know what I'm saying?
For sure. I just, what's fun in basketball? Running and gunning, shooting threes and dunks, right? If you could add guys like Trae Young, Steph Curry and stuff like that who could routinely pull up from, 35 and take a 4-point shot. Plus, at the end of games, it's another way to make things tight at the end of the game. I think it would seem gimmicky at first, but be fun. But again, I don't have any way to know that until they actually try it out.
So I'm all for trying new things for me. And I'm always like, I'm a historian in the way. I'm never big on changes like that like affect numbers big time. Obviously it would be the first time ever having a 4-point shot, and the numbers would be what they'll be. But, you'd probably see guys scoring more. Although that's just a minor setback. So,
what did you go with for NBA?
Shorten the season. So I think the season is just too long. The regular season doesn't matter enough. You're already seeing this big time now with guys, load management, like managing their loads. It's ridiculous at this point. I think
shorten it to like 68 games and don't do back-to-backs or something?
Somewhere between 60 and 70 games. And I just think the regular season is already a little bit too diluted, and it would make each game worth more and bring more attraction to the regular season. Now, the flip side of that is that people love the regular season. The NBA is a fun product, so it would suck for the fans. So,
I think I'm torn on that one because I'm with you about for the reasons you said. Like, the idea of getting rid of the wear and tear in the players' bodies is probably a better thing, and we get you a better product come postseason. But I'm selfish right here, and I want more basketball. I'm also a DFS provider, so I want more months of basketball to make more money.
It's that question, like, it's basically the same thing as, like, we love the Thursday night football game, but it really sucks for the players, and it's really, like, not the best game. Now, that's, like, a direct, like, kind of example, but it basically is the same thing, The players hate the Thursday night football game.
Yeah, they do. And I get why they do.
Hell yeah. I mean, you hear about how players feel after games to only have 3 days to recover. It's pretty ridiculous.
Man, like, and as big as strong as these guys are, when you're getting hit by guys that size over and over and over again, and even if you never played football, like tackle football, and depending on what position you played to, it'll change up a little bit. Like, I don't know, cornerbacks probably don't get hit as much. I played cornerback and I played running back in high school. Played a lot of two-way. Playing quarterback was just a lot easier on my body than playing running back. So, for guys like that who are getting hit over and over and over and over again, to try to get back, turn around in 4 days and play again, like, it is hell on your body.
Yeah, it is.
So, okay. NFL, I struggled with.
Same.
I wasn't sure what I wanted to do for a rule change in this one, but I ultimately thought about what leaves a sour taste in my mouth the most. So I thought about some of the bad penalties, and I'm like, well, we're already doing review on pass interference, so it's not changing it. I would say do a better job of it, because we saw them screw that up over and over again last year. Even under the review, they weren't getting it right routinely. But I wanted to change the overtime rules, and I wanted to go with something new and almost more fair and gimmicky like college. And I didn't have the exact way I'd want to do it, but almost like you get 10 chances to score from the 10-yard line. And whatever team scores more of those 10 chances, they end up being the winner or something along those lines. Like, it'd be more gimmicky. It'd be along the lines of college. We wouldn't be, even with the coin flip, it's just, to me, it's still not fair. But I would change the overtime rules.
I think college football overtime is the best overtime. I agree with you on this one, too.
Okay.
Just change it to college, though. I don't even think you need to change it. College OT is the best. Now, maybe it's a little too gimmicky, but maybe it's not. Like, if you know what I mean? Like, I agree with you. I think that's...
Like, if they changed baseball extra innings to a home run derby, it would seem gimmicky, but then after a while, once you got used to it, it'd be fun as hell.
Justin Turner suggested that.
Yeah, that's why I thought of that. That's why it came off the top of my head, because I'm like, that seems gimmicky, but then I thought about it, I'm like, that actually would be entertaining, and ultimately, sports is to be entertained.
This is true.
So, and we know that more than ever is we're all bored as hell right now. watching things like the Tiger King. You know what I mean? Like we all know how much we miss our entertainment.
Yeah, did you see like that new episode of the Tiger King that came out? Oh my God, it's just like Joel McHale like interviewing the guys from it.
Well, I didn't like this series enough to probably even get back into it. I think it's worth watching just so you get all the jokes that go along with it for modern culture and because we have free time, but I probably won't watch the extra episode.
We had it on in the background. I did not pay attention.
All right. And so for football, you did the same thing, overtime?
Correct.
Awesome. All right. So I wanted to get back to our bread and butter for a minute. And I know I've done private videos on this one before and things like that. But if somebody would never play DFS before, what would be the number one piece of advice you would start by giving them?
There's two things I would say. There's two things. I think they're both really important. One is something that you talk about a lot. Know your goals. Know what you want. There's a ton of different games to play. There's a ton of different objectives, goals. Know what you want out of it. That's number one. That's the priority. For me, though, getting into like kind of detail about actual DFS, well, one piece of advice I would give that I give a lot that I give to customers is that there are no rules in the sense that everything is slate dependent. Everything changes by, the slate. Every sport is different. That's a given. But even within the sports, every night, every slate is different. And you have to view it as such. You have to build lineups organically. You can't look at what one night did and then bring it on to the next night. And that would be honestly where I would start because that's a hard thing to get in your mental.
Mm-hmm. There's so many things that change. Like even this year in NBA, when people were like, well, the cash lines are they're 280 or 290 now for double ups and they're not 250. I'm like, but your goal hasn't changed for looking for a player to 5X. The difference has been now with more sits and more misprices, most slates have 2 or 3 chalk guys who go off that everybody owns. And that's why the scores are going up. Not because every player is going for 6X or something like that. It's because there's 2 or 3, sometimes 4 chalk guys per night that they raise the line. But outside of those guys that everybody's playing, then you're still looking for your guys to 5X if it's just like a random play.
Yeah, exactly. So
I don't know. 6X or 7X in GPP.
Yeah, that's something we talk about a lot, like when we go over the slates and stuff, and even when we're breaking them down. But I think it's just really important to view each slate differently because the pricing is different. The amount of games are different. It's really hard to not bring what happened last night into the night or into the next night. But it's kind of a mindset you have to have. Where did you go on this one?
So there's a lot of different things that we can bring up having played this game every day for 6 years, except for the last month. Ultimately, and this will kind of get you to some of the things that you brought up, but that is respect your competition and understand that you're playing against other very intelligent, very well-researched, and oftentimes better funded players who have all the same information that you do. So, like I remember when I first started playing DFS, I figured because of my ability to do math at a very high level and my ability to sit down, do the research and know sports, that it would be easy. It's not easy. And one, this will help you deal with your losses better because you'll understand that you're playing against a lot of other very intelligent people because the DFS community as a whole, especially now more than ever, is extremely bright. But that also means like if you're not putting the time and effort in, don't be playing for big money because you're just going to be giving it away. If you just want a little skin in the game for the night, but all you did was look over the slate for 5 minutes, play the $3 sharpshooter or $4, play a $5 dub up. Because if you're putting, $500 into tonight and you can't afford to lose that, you're only putting 5 minutes of work into it, you're going to lose long term. So respect your competition. And I know that's something for me personally, I have to tell myself on a daily basis. And whether that's playing poker, whether that's, in the business community when I worked in there, because sometimes guys like me who have an ego, you forget that there's other guys out there who also are really good at things and know things. And sometimes they're better than you. And it's hard to wrap your mind around it because you have a lot of confidence, but there are people out there better at things than you and they can kick your butt. So you have to remind yourself that they may be better funded, better researched, better disciplined, and that you're not the cream of the crop at everything. And maybe you just got to, remember that someday. So respect your competition. There are smart people with a lot of money putting in a lot of work at this thing. So it's not an easy game.
I love it. It's a great piece of advice, man. I love it.
So moving along from there, what is the most impressive record in sports? I want you to go first on this one. So I thought about this one for a while, but I'm going to see where you went.
For me, that I couldn't come up with an answer. So I'm going to let you. I couldn't come up with one.
So, I mean, a couple of them that I thought off the top of my head, the Joe DiMaggio's hit streak was something that I thought about. I thought about, honestly, kind of an under the radar one for me is the Scott Skiles assist record. Like, I think he had like 31 assists in the game or something like that. Like, that's crazy. Like, how many times a year do you see somebody with 20 assists? Like, twice? Dude had over 30 assists in the game. So I really thought about that one. Wilt Chamberlain's 100 points. But the problem is like, that was like freakish style stuff. Like, Wilt he was a man amongst boys back then. So it just wasn't as impressive to me. So I went with the Cal Ripken consecutive game streak because I just don't think that'll ever be beaten.
Interesting. For me, like that might not be beaten, but I don't know, like if it's more impressive to me than like DiMaggio's 56 game hit streak. So
I really consider that one too.
Like, it's hard to say which one could be broken faster because honestly, 56 games, like no one gets even close to that usually or ever. So.
And then the day of not playing every day, like nobody's going to touch Cal Ripken's. But I mean, like when was the last time somebody threatened DiMaggio? Like there isn't.
No, there isn't. So like you're right. And I think that if you ask me which record is more likely to be broken, it's probably DiMaggio's because there's just more of a chance because it's more guys like you talked about. There's more guys resting, et cetera, et cetera. But DiMaggio's is more impressive to me. I don't think either of them will be broken.
That's a good word. Impressive versus likely to be broken.
Exactly.
Kind of like if you hear 100 points for Wilt Chamberlain, you're like, that's impressive. But then like you know that like he was half a foot taller than everybody else that was out there. They just gave him the ball every single time down there. He just shot it. It's just, again, it'll probably never be beaten.
I could see that being caught with the 3-point.
I mean, it's possible, but I mean, Kobe went insane and was still 19 points short.
I could see a guy making like 25 threes in a game if he got crazy hot.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's 25 more points, though, so it's not like easy to get there. I'm just saying I could see it.
Yeah, 25 threes still needs 25 more points.
Exactly.
So, okay. Next question. So for you, as somebody who does sports betting, plays year-long, and does DFS, if you had to be relegated down to one sport and one type of action, what would it be for you?
Definitely. What do you think I answered? Let me hear this.
MLB DFS?
I knew that's what you think I would say, and you're close, but it's actually MLB betting. So okay. Very, very close for me. But I had to think about the rest of my life. Will I love DFS forever? Will DFS be maybe too stressful? Like, same could be said for betting, but I have to pick something. And DFS is just more stressful for me than sports betting. It's just what it is. So I went with betting.
All right. So you went baseball betting. And I don't know about you, but the month off of NBA DFS has reminded me of how much work NBA DFS is.
Yes.
Like no longer like my sister has been quarantined for a month and hasn't seen a human being. So this weekend we're going to risk it. You know, she hasn't seen anybody in a month. She's fine. Me and my kids are fine. So we went and saw her and stuff like that. But like the idea of being able to go out of town on a whim and not have to worry about lock and customers and stuff like that, it's been really refreshing. All that being said, NBA DFS is the most fun to me by a long shot, so that's what I'd play.
Yeah, I get that. And maybe that's something that we should remember when stuff picks up again, that we should take time to enjoy that little stuff, and it doesn't always have to be so hectic. It's easier said than done, but it's the truth. Yeah, so that's how I see it.
All right, so last question. I spent a while looking at this one. And then all of a sudden, like, it just came to me. It was like the easiest answer of all time. So who did you come up with? Which athlete had their career most ruined by injuries?
I thought this was like really hard too. I think there's plenty of ways to go. I'm really interested to hear who you went. The first two guys that come to my mind, it seems like now I'm missing someone because you said it's so obvious. First guy is Brandon Roy.
I looked at him forever.
So he was the guy that was an all-star for Portland, and injuries just really derailed his career. He was never the same after getting hurt. Tried to battle, but he just could never get healthy. So actually, I have three guys that I think are all right there. Next is Grant Hill, who kind of in the same vein as Brandon Roy was an all-star, transcendent type of player, one of the best college players ever, maybe the best Duke player ever.
So I was before we get into that, I looked at both of those guys, like two of the first guys that I looked at. And I thought the difference between the two of them was Brandon Roy never really looked like he was going to be an MVP, but his career got really short. Grant Hill looked like he was a rising star MVP type of player. But dude still played till he was 40.
He did, but he was not the same. He was never the same guy when he signed with Orlando. Like, he was never that guy that they needed him to be. He was always hurt, so injuries hurt him. And then the other guy that I really think about, and it's hard because he obviously wasn't ever anything, but injuries stole this guy's career, and that's Greg Oden, a guy who is supposed to be the next everything, the next monster big man inside, and just couldn't be that guy because injuries hurt his career. We've seen that before with big men. He's not the first. He certainly won't be the last. I mean, we talk about it even now with like Joel Embiid, how worried we are that he's going to get hurt all the time. That's why Shaq was also such a rare breed, because he wasn't like that. He was just a different type of big and different type of – he was just massive all around. You weren't worried about like his fragile bones. So, that's how I saw it. Ultimately, I'm going to go with Greg Oden because while he has the biggest question mark, I think injuries hurt him the most.
All right, so this is the question I spent the second most time on. And I went through and I was looking at Grant Hill's numbers and I was looking at Brandon Roy's numbers and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I'm like, this is the easiest question up here. How did I not just remember it's Bo Jackson?
Well, it is. I mean, it's not for me.
Because Bo Jackson was a Pro Bowl and an all-star baseball player who, after that horrible hip injury after David Felcher coned him from behind, lost his entire football career. I mean, this guy was arguably the greatest athlete of all time. If you want to go back to like what he did in track when he was younger, this is a guy that could almost stand still and like take off and dunk from the free throw line. He was a freakish athlete that a lot of you guys may not remember because you're younger, who was legitimately a Pro Bowl football player and an all-star baseball player, played both two sports at a high level, and just had a gruesome hip injury and could never play football again.
Yeah, it's a good one. I didn't even think about that because that's not the first thing I think about when I think about Bo Jackson. And that's
I spent 25 minutes looking at other guys and didn't even think about him until he came into my mind.
And it's hard because like Greg Oden, he didn't have great numbers. He didn't have anything because of injuries. Yeah. So it's hard to put him in the conversation, but it's also, man, he didn't even get to do anything. So injuries hurt him the most. It's an interesting way to look at it. As always, there's different ways to skin the cat.
Still, I never enjoyed reading any book as much as I enjoyed reading the Bo Jackson autobiography. And again, this is well over 20 years ago. I was maybe 25, 30 years ago I read this. And I feel like I read it in a day or two when I was a kid because, like, the stories of him, like in third grade, beating the crap out of like 6th and 7th graders for their lunch money and stuff like that. Like, this guy was a freak beyond freaks as far as like just raw, pure, like human specimens go. Like, you take a look at some of these guys, like he might be a better athlete than LeBron James. Like, we think of LeBron James as maybe the greatest athlete that we've seen because of the size and the speed and the athleticism. Like, Bo Jackson was probably a better overall athlete.
Maybe in his time. I don't think that. I'm not going to say that Bo Jackson like was a better athlete than LeBron, but in his time, I think he was.
Yeah, I mean Bo was a freak. So that then got me thinking about like, who else am I missing? So I actually Googled it and started looking up like lists other people had made. And it made me remember some other guys that were maybe older that some of y'all might not remember. But one guy that I completely forgot about that I shouldn't have is Sterling Sharp of the Green Bay Packers, who was making bad quarterbacks look good. He broke the all-time reception record. He was perennial, like 100 catches, 1,400 yards, and he was doing this with like Don Majkowski before Brett Favre got there. And then he had a major neck injury, and he never got to finish his career. If Sterling Sharp got to play until he was, in his mid-30s, like a lot of other wide receivers, I mean, dude probably would have ended up with 18,000 wide receiving yards, and he'd be all over the top of the charts. Another football player that's way before both of our time, Gale Sayers.
Yeah, that's going to be before my time for sure.
Well, I mean, way before my time, too.
Mm-hmm.
And then another baseball player who might arguably be the best pitcher of all time, way before our time as well, but also had his career, horribly shortened, Sandy Koufax.
Yeah, I of course love him. One of, if not the best Jewish athlete of all time.
So he was great. I mean, the two pitchers that I think of when I think of greatness from before my time are Bob Gibson and Sandy Koufax. But Sandy Koufax really only got to give it a go. I think this was like 7-8 years. And then
the other guy I forgot about was Penny Hardaway.
Yeah, he was another guy. There was all those basketball players I was looking at before. All of a sudden, I was like Bo Jackson, because Penny Hardaway was another guy. I was looking at his numbers, what happened to him, and he made the list of when I started looking these things up. There's a lot of people up there,
for sure.
So that's what we got for questions today, guys. Hopefully, you're enjoying these things. It gives us something to talk about. I know my afternoon goes by a lot faster, and we get an opportunity to get in here and talk sports. And I know a lot of you guys are also desperate for entertainment, just like we are.
Amen to that.
So what's next? All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Thumbs up is always appreciated. Keep watching.
Thank you.